Um, all right, thank you for coming. And as I mentioned at the little welcome thing on Friday night, Norma has been a very big part of Beantown for very many years. But I guess I'm going to start. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Orly, and so we're just gonna all say some personal things and just keep it nice and informal. But I'm gonna start. Some of you have probably heard me say this before, but I'm just gonna start by saying how we met Norma. It was in the later 1990s, and we were at some big dance event that was held at the Meadowlands in New Jersey, and Norma was there with Frankie, and we had seen Norma a few times, but we had never met her. We were afraid of her at that time, but I'm not going to go into that. She needed a ride home, and she was staying at her sister's in Harlem, and so Tony and I were like, oh, we're driving kind of that way, we can give her a ride home. So we did, and it was the most wonderful thing because when we got into Harlem, we basically got our personal tour of all the things that were. We'd drive by here, oh, that's where we went and did this, and that's where that ballroom was, and it was really wonderful. But the thing that had continued to touch me over the years is that she remembered that, and she even mentioned it a bunch of times at Beantown when she was introduced about when she met us, and I was like, I remember it, but Norma remembers it, so that was kind of cool. But she started coming to Beantown in our early days, not quite the first year, but pretty soon after. And in the beginning, I would mostly say she was kind of like a performer. We always had something that she would do, and she'd dress in her sparkly clothes, but that always continued. And she would sing. We don't often give some history, but then the part she would actually do is she would sing or something of that nature, and so she would come in and perform and make her exit. But then after Frankie passed, which is 10 years ago now, we started having Norma do a lot of the things that Frankie had done, like tell us stories, and we did a variety of different things, including a bunch of interviews. I know Peter did some, and Bobby ended up doing a lot of the interviews, Q&As and things, just to get Norma to tell us about her life and her history so that we could learn it firsthand from her. And I found over the years, as I got to know her, especially the last 10 years after Frankie had passed, I spent a lot of time with her at Beantown, and I wasn't scared of her anymore by any means. She was an absolutely wonderful person, incredibly nice, and extremely easy to talk to. And she was someone you could just talk to, she's your longtime friend. She was really like that. And she absolutely loved coming to Beantown, seeing all the dancers, and I often sat next to her when, Beantown Bounce was on, or something was going on, or we were just sitting here and watching the band. And it just thrilled me so much that she was so happy, and she'd kind of give me a little nudge and have something to say. She always had something to say. Another thing we love about Norma. Norma didn't keep it in. But I love that, and I feel so grateful that I did get to know her and that I could call her a friend. And I'm also so grateful that so many people were able to meet Norma, that she was here, and I always encouraged people, go talk to Norma. Norma loves to talk. Just go talk to her, go sit next to her, have a moment with her, meet her. Don't just see her in the distance, because this is your chance, and that's something we all can keep with us for the rest of our lives. So I'm going to pass this to Sylvia, and then we're just going to head our way down the line.
So I met Norma in the middle, I think it was 1985 or 1986, I can't remember. It was in New York City. And I kind of knew who she was, but I was not prepared at all for the force that she was in any way, shape, or form. I was with my original dance partner, Jonathan, and we were hanging out with her, and she goes, come on, let's go get some waffles and chicken. So we're like, oh, good deal. So we went to Harlem, it's a little hole-in-the-wall place, and we had some food, and then she goes, okay, so I'm going to this birthday party, you're coming with me? And I'm like, okay. And we went to this birthday party. It turned out to be Mama Lou Parks' birthday party. And I walked in and went like, holy blah, 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 blah. I'm with famous people. And I'm the only white kid here except for Jonathan. And Mama Lou Parks was really great. She kept giving me cake. She'd come and she'd, you need some cake. I went, about an hour later, hey, you need some cake. I went, you betcha. Anyway, and Norma, even in that situation, was able to kind of hold court. And I was like, this woman is really has a solid, a solidity about her that really draws people in. I mean, she's not like a black hole. I didn't mean it like that. But she's like, she was just a force that brought people to her. And then that same night, she goes, I don't want to go home. I live in Crack City. I don't want to go there. So can I stay with you guys? And I said, da-da-da-doo. So I said, good hustle, Tony. So Jonathan and I had some little apartment we were in. Thank you. And we said, sure, so there's an extra bed in there. So she stayed with us. We were with her for 3 whole days solid. And the next day she said, I'm going to do this little stand-up at the Apollo, so you guys are coming. I thought, because I'm an idiot, I thought, oh, this poor nice little old lady's going to be at the Apollo. And they're going to eat her up because, she's this nice little lady and she's got a force and stuff, but it's the Apollo, And I thought, oh my God, how are we going to deal with this poor woman who's going to be crushed at the Apollo? Because I'm an idiot. So we go to the Apollo, and both Jonathan and I were just sweating bullets. We were so nervous for her. She came out on the stage, and after about 25 seconds, I went, okay, I'm an idiot. She had the entire location just eating out of her hands. I'm not doing anything. So the place was just, she had the entire Apollo audience, which was packed, screaming and crying and laughing. And I was just so impressed. I thought, well, wow, this woman's like way more than I even thought yesterday. She killed. And then, so the rest of that night, she told us all about Red Fox and all the stuff. It was really, really great. And she went into talking about how it was difficult to be a single, African-American woman trying to make it in show business in the 40s and 50s and 60s. I went, yeah, I get that, even though I understand that it's way easier for me. But she was really funny she had really great funny stories about how hard it was for her. She didn't cry in her soup about, oh, it's just been so hard. But she said, it's been so hard, and then she'd make me laugh about it. And that's, I have lots of other memories of Norma, but those are the ones that I kind of cherish most because I didn't really know who she was. After that, I had an idea who she was, so I came to my interactions with her expecting to be amused and stuff like this, but that first time I wasn't at all, and she was just really great. So I got to spend 3 entire days, morning, noon, and night with Norma, and those are really precious to me. Who do I get the microphone to now?
Hi, I'm Phil Crutchfield, and I date back to about 10 or 15 years here at Beantown. And Norma really put the mark on this place for me because there was one time when I came up here and Orly said, well, Phil, do you want to help Norma out and pick her up and so on and so forth? I said, sure. I didn't think anything of it. I knew she is a woman of great celebrity and all that stuff. But it turned out that it was so impactful. And what I mean by that is I started then being what you might call driving Miss Norma. we were just 2 peas in a pod. That's the way it was. And so what I did was kicked off my day. You kick off your day by running down here and having breakfast. I kicked off my day by saying, well, what time do you want me to pick you up? And I say, okay, I'll be there at 8. And I try to get there 10 or 15 minutes early. And I get there early, I thought. And there she was over there, and I think it was Manchester or one of those. And I said, she was right out of her room by herself, unassisted for many years, and just sitting there waiting for me. And we didn't have showers and stuff like that would force her in. So I pull up and take her, and so I bring her down here for breakfast, and we do the issue of, well, what are you going to do for your day? I got my calendar, you got yours, what do you want to do? I'm going to stay here in Callahan and watch some of the stuff and then take me back to my room. So that was kind of my day. It was wonderful. I mean, it's tough now, but one of the memories that's really hard for me is to drive up to Rose or the Lodge or any of those places and drive by where I used to pick her up, because it just tears at me now. I gotta stop right now. But anyway, it was tough. So I really feel that the thing that she shared with us and all of us was to be with us and share her experiences. Going back to my day, where the television days, where Red Fox and all those, I could relate to some of that stuff, and I could relate to the fact that the 30s and 40s, that was my parents' day, and my mom she used to love to do the jitterbug, and so she really brought me back to a lot of that. And then just driving her from her room down here, and then speaking and listening to her tell her stories, and then coming here and have lunch and have you guys gather around and listen to her. And she could hold you and hold your attention for a good while. She just did it. And she said what she felt. I mean, there's no two words about it. If you didn't like it, she's going to say it anyway, and she's going to say it loud. So you knew she was in the room, and you knew she was saying something that you wanted to sit down and listen to. And she just brings out a lot of memories for me. It's really tough. Thank you. Wow.
Okay. Hello. LaTasha Barnes. Tasha, it's fine. Not gonna make any promises of keeping it together. Sorry.
Good luck.
Thanks. So, I'm in the realm of, what are we calling it now? The new old dancers. People see me dancing, they're like, oh, it's so great. What college are you at? So cute. There was a young man the other day. He was like, oh, it must be so weird to go gray so soon. I was like, what? I was like, yeah? So you're 24, right? But this was, I say this because this is how Miss Norma perceived me when she first met me. Yeah, Frankie 100 was the very first time that I met Miss Norma. And she was not just holding court, she was court. She was on that upper tier, for those of you who weren't there. And I was thrown into the jam circle by Angela Andrews. Had my moment, all I knew then was really house dance, and I was like, okay, this is really fast music, just move fast, keep grooving. Yeah. And Miss Norma, unfortunately, saw my presentation there in the jam circle, and Judy, because this was my first event as a Frankie Manning Foundation ambassador, and Miss Judy wanted to make sure that we met the elders who were there. Some of the Marble Parks dancers were up there, all the DC hand dancers, everybody was upstairs. And so Judy came down and made sure that we got upstairs to meet Miss Norma and Barbara and Sugar and everyone else that was there. And we entered into the area, which just felt very royal in and of itself. It's like, oh, okay, I don't know what I'm doing here, but all right. And I could hear in the back as Miss Judy was taking us around to everybody, that's her! That's her! I was like, but you know how you hear the voice and you're like, she talking about me. I'm just gonna stay this, keep meeting everybody over here. She's not talking about me. Yeah, get her with the dress. Yeah, with the dress. You from DC? It's like, yeah, yes, Miss Norma, yes, yeah. And Miss Judy, of course, was like, just go to Miss Judy. And I told this story to Bobby also, and the short condensed version. I'd never met her before, so I didn't really know much about her and about her story. I had seen her, seen footage of her, and someone had very kindly shown me several clips of her and Frankie dancing. And I didn't understand that I was meeting my new grandmother. And so we commenced upon a 10-minute exchange about whether or not I was from DC and whether or not I could hand dance and whether or not I was a swing dancer. And the gist of it was, even though I'm from Richmond, Virginia, grew up doing the two-step dances there and come from the urban dance scene, I am from DC, I am a hand dancer, and that's it. I learned very quickly when you're talking to Miss Norma, you nod and smile and yes, Miss Norma. Yes, yes I do. Yes ma'am, okay. That was it. This came in handy when I felt that there was a transitionary moment, which I think many of the dancers of color shared last year on the panel. That'll be revisited later tonight. That we have this moment of this change in our sense of purpose being a part of this community. And it moves less from being participatory to being responsible to and for, which are very different things. And in that moment, I recognized that, with learning, being the educator that I endeavor to be and trying to make sure I carry the traditions and the movements and the embodiments that go with these art forms, I wanted to also be sure to carry as much of their stories as I could. And so I asked Ms. Norma if we could sit down for an interview for a project that my organization, Urban Artistry, does called The Preservatory. And we were able to get this together at Herang one year. And fortunately, I made friends with Rick from the Rudy, so they brought out the big fancy camera and all the microphones. And of course, she was like, what do I do with all this? Can we just talk? Like, yes, Ms. Norma, but I need to record you so people can hear what you're saying. And it was a beautiful discussion about her life, her history, her story, and we didn't realize we had so many things in common, both being of Bayesian, Barbadian descent, and dancing at our family rent parties and things like this. But really, in that moment, she really just impressed upon me that I was moving in the right direction. And I didn't recognize that she had taken me on as a mentee in that moment. Something she never forgot, because Norma never forgot anything. You may think she's messing up, but really it's you. Yeah. Norma remembered. And in that, again, later, when she pushed me, she was always telling me, I asked her once, in that interview, how she felt about not having kids and all of this. It's like, I want more than enough. I don't need to do all that. It's like, yes, you're right. You are so right. But in that, she wasn't saying, there was something wrong with that. She was, I can be whatever I want to be. I can be more than one thing. And that's what sent me to grad school. And then when I was in that journey of continuing the documentation process, I asked her again, but more officially as an NYU researcher, if I could sit down with her for another interview. And that was here at Beantown last year. And she had Darlene Askew-Gist with her. So I managed to get both of them on camera riffing off of each other. Bobby was in the room. It was magical. And it'll be released later once NYU lets me. But just to get her on camera, looking at her own footage, her own photos, telling the stories of what was happening on the background of all of these things, and reminding me in that moment to continue to just tell the stories, make them present, and be present myself. And that was something that she always endeavored to do, keeping the beat in the forefront of everything. And it just is so profound to me, reviewing the footage for the scientific analysis, that the pace even of the discussion was just, you could follow the flow between them. Once they start riffing, it was just a beautiful rhythmic exchange of information and history. And that's what I want to continue to take from her and continue to express in the way that I move, in the way that I live, not just move dancing, but move through life, is to continue to do everything with that beat and her heart full and present and everything. That's all.
Hi, I'm Tara Newborn, and this is my 7th year at Beantown. And Norma, gosh, I had seen her at another event, I don't even remember when, but I had heard all these stories about how how much of a force she is, and I tend to be kind of a shy person, a reserved person. And the first year I was here, I maybe knew a handful of people, and I think my husband at the time had told Tony that I sang, and he was like, "Oh, you're going to be in Beantown Bounce." I was like, "Okay, all right." So I sang a couple of songs, and I see Norma. I see her teeth. That's all I can see. I can see her teeth. And then from that moment on, actually, it was a kind of a similar moment. I was walking in a room, and she said, "Yeah, that's her. That's Honeysuckle Rose." You know, and she had this way of telling me, asking me what I was doing, and asking what I was doing, because at the time, my kids were younger, and I didn't think of myself as much more than a hobbyist vocalist and a mom, and her telling me was her way of saying, you get out there, you have more than you think you have, and you have every right to be there. And so for every event, ILHC, wherever we were in the same venue, and daily here at Beantown, I was always summoned by the Queen. Yes. Yeah. Summoned by where's Taryn? I'm getting a series of texts and calls. Norma's looking for you. I was like, okay, yes. I mean, it was never a bother. I was always honored. And, one year I got up to sing Lush Life, and she tells me the story that her stories with Billy Strayhorn. And I'm like, she was here. She was actually there. The things that I endeavor, my influences, she was there. She facilitated my first performance in New York. I'm from Atlanta, and I got to go to New York to sing with Norma. And there's this one picture. I could only do one of her performances, and there's this picture that we have. And where I'm trying to smile for the camera, she's like, "Can't you stay for the next performance?" I was like, "No, who's paying for my plane ticket?" And she looks up at me and she laughs. And I will always keep that picture. But Norma is a force to, when she's telling you something, it's not just out of her breath. It's not just talking out the side of her neck. She was very intentional about what she told you. And another thing was, she was telling me, she said, "I want you to hear this song." It was about a poem written about her mother called Black Woman. And she said, so she sang it. I still have it in my voice recorder. She sang it in the voice recorder. And 24 hours later, I performed it at Beantown's Got Talent as a surprise to her. And so it's one of those things where she gave that to me. She said, "That's yours. Please take it and do with it what you need to." She said, "I believe it was meant for you." So I'm here to thank Norma for forcing me out of my comfort zone, which was really uncomfortable, and forcing me into a place where I really needed to be.
I got to meet Norma. I'm Bobby White. I got to meet Norma really for the first time here. I've met her before, but at Beantown I got to really engage with her and talk to her and really truly meet her. And I remember we would do interviews here at Beantown, which you can find on YouTube. And I thank Tony and Orly so much for that opportunity. It's one of my biggest things I treasure most in my swing dance experience. But I would give a talk or something, every time I came to Beantown. It was usually like informative or fun or that sort of thing. And I was giving this talk, and Norma Miller walks in and sits down in the front row hearing me talk. And I'm already a little bit nervous because it's the first time I'm giving the talk, and I get a little bit more nervous. And it's this like 21 secrets to swing dancing or something like that. And so I have these little note cards that are there to remind me. And I keep on having to go check my notes. And Norma says, "Bobby, stop looking for your notes. You got this. You got this." And I appreciated her confidence in me. But I might have been trying to juggle too many things in that talk as it was. But now I'm going to try to honor Norma, and I have no notes. I'm gonna try. Norma did not mind telling you that your rhythm was shit. And this is understandably troubling to some of the people whom she might have told this to, or how direct she could be. And I think a lot of us in the scene over the last 2 decades might have equated that with mean or harsh, or like Frankie Manning is really charming and nice, but Norma Miller, I don't know, right? And that's not exactly fair. What a lot of times Norma Miller, even when she told stories of her life, she kind of, some of those greatest hits that we all remember is like Norma Miller dancing outside on the street at Savoy, and then Twist Mouth George picks her up, takes her inside, and dances with her, right? Or Norma Miller just so happened to grow up, behind the Savoy, and so she went to sleep with that music every night. And those are wonderful stories, but they don't tell you how hard she worked on her dancing. They don't tell you how much she loved dancing. She was dancing on the street corners. The reason why Twist Mouth George saw her is because she was dancing her ass off on the street corners every day. She would go and take the money that they would throw down, she would pick that up and she would go see movies. You know what movies she would see? Dancing pictures, musical pictures. She would stay in the theater all day copying the steps that she would see on the screen, because that's how much she loved dancing. And then, before she was a teenager, she knew she wanted to be a professional dancer, and she knew that black children, black women, did not have the opportunity to go do that in the professional circuit with ballet classes and modern classes. And so she knew at an early age that if she was going to make a profession out of this thing, that she would have to do it herself all of the way. And so when she went and danced, when she got good enough so that Whitey asked her to come and watch the dancers at the Savoy Ballroom. He wouldn't even let her dance with them at first, so she came and she watched the great Lindy Hoppers every weekend until she was good enough, or until Whitey thought she was good enough to ask her out there to dance. And then she would dance, and then the rest of the story. She worked with the Whitey's Lindy Hoppers. Yes, she was in all those films, but those films are like 3 days of filming out of a career of dancing on stages all across New York, all across America, all across the world, and dancing her ass off. And so one of my favorite moments in an interview that I did with Norma is, I forgot how we got onto the topic, but she mentioned that the other, is here Beantown, a few nights previously, they had done a Big Apple. And, like they played the music, and all the social dancers did the Big Apple. And Norma said, "You did the Big Apple the other night." And you could tell that she did not like it. And it's okay, you don't have to tell that she didn't like it, because the next thing she said was that she did not like it. But what she said when I was going back and looking over this, what she was upset about is that she wasn't upset that people were improvising and making up a lot, that they were dancing on top of it. That didn't make her angry that they were improvising. What made her angry is that they didn't know the steps in the first place. She said, you have to know the steps, and then you can play with them. Then you can improvise on them. And I think we in the scene have to be so careful of thinking that swing dancing is an improvisational dance form. Therefore, we can just make it up, or we can just do what we do and then call it swing dancing. For Norma Miller, this dance is a legacy. You learn the steps, and then you can play with them. And so that was something that I found that hit me to the heart from Norma Miller.
Hi, my name is Richard Badu, and I met Norma the first time back in the early 90s in Harang. And then later on, I got to really get to know Norma, thanks to Tony and Orly. when she became my roommate every year here. And I don't even remember how many years, but it's like we got to know each other. So like all the stories that everybody's been telling, there's parts of everything that I've seen, you know. But every day I'd be seeing Norma. Sort of like Phil, he'd pick her up, but he'd drop her off at night, and you'd think she'd stop. No, she could tell me stories till 3 a.m. And the thing that a word that people hold in court. Well, she loved to perform, and she was performing on stage in front at breakfast, and even sometimes. But then I also got to see her when she wasn't, and that's something that really hits home, because I get to see her in another context. And I used to make Norma laugh. Way back when, I told her George Burns' joke when he reached his 90s. He said, "At my age, you don't buy green bananas." And so every year I'd say, "Hey Norma, you got any green bananas?" And she'd laugh for like 10 minutes. She'd be gone. She'd be gone. Also, my dance partner was a part of our suite a couple of times, and there's some stories. Some I can repeat. One of them, my dance partner could relate to what Latasha said. She was having some problems she was writing a book, one of her books, and she was having trouble opening up the program. So she asked Susan, my partner, how to open it up, and she couldn't figure out how to do it. She said, "I figured all you teenagers knew how to do this stuff." And then Susan said, "I'm in my mid-30s. He said, "You're an old bitch." But she said it in the nicest of ways. Having a 90-some-odd-year-old woman call you an old bitch when you're in your 30s, it's like, it's hard to describe. And it wasn't a bad thing. I mean, it was just so funny. It was just so funny. There's so many moments like that. Also, I had a privilege, one time, I often bring my guitar here or some instrument here and play. And she heard me singing this song that I wrote for Frankie Manning's 80th birthday back when he was 80. She said, "Oh, I want you to play that for my DVD release party." And I said, "Yeah, where is that?" And she said, "At the Apollo." You know, it didn't wind up being at the Apollo, it wound up being at the Schoenberg. But still, it was like, yeah. But at any rate, it was let's just say it was the fairest of them all. And they had this jazz trio playing in the background, and Norma introduced me as her troubadour because I was always playing every time she came. And then I was doing this, playing the song, and all of a sudden I hear like tinkling on the keys, and the bass playing, you know. And if I wasn't so scared about being in front of all these people, like that knew Norma, I would have like, "Hey, take a solo" or something like that. But I was just like, "I'm gonna finish the song." You know? I hope I remember all the lyrics. Anyway, so Norma, yeah, she was such a trip. When she found out I could give a good neck massage.
Best.
I'm the guy teaching Tai Chi here, so I personally do Tai Chi every morning and every night. So in the morning I'm doing Tai Chi like this, and then Norma. She didn't say wait till you finish your form or something. You're like, all right. at any rate, yeah. So Norma, I really miss her. I really miss her because like every day, I mean, Beantown is all the wonderful things that Beantown is, but being with Norma was a huge part of it, and I miss her.
Hands are sweaty, jeez. Hi, I'm John. I met Norma about 10 yards that way, 10 years and 1 day ago. I know that because it was the day after I turned 20, and I was a very young, brave human who said, I know who Norma is. I'm a young dancer. No one's sitting next to her now. I'm gonna go sit next to Norma and have a conversation. I did not know what I was getting myself into. 2 hours later, she knew my family history. She was giving me advice on, in college I was studying opera. She was giving me advice on my opera career and telling me she had connections with the New York Met. And then I said, well, you know, I'm studying that, but I really love dancing. And like, that's why I'm here, because that's what I want to do. And she said, well, if you really love dancing, why are you talking to me? Which should have been obvious. But she said, no, come with me. And stands up, grabs my arm, walks me on the floor, says, dance with her. And then she stands on the side of the floor and watches us dance for 2 songs while I'm dying inside. I have no idea who this human I danced with was. If it was you, thank you so much, because we finished our dance. I walked over to Norma, she patted me on the shoulder and said, you're a pretty good dancer. That was all I needed for years from Norma. And then a couple years later, I performed she called me her opera singer for years. She didn't remember my name, and that was fine with me. Same as Honeysuckle Rose. Like, you got a nickname from Norma. It didn't matter what it was. You loved it. And so, a couple years later in the Beantown Bounce, I performed a routine that Norma dubbed the drunk routine. And she really loved it, and she pulled me off aside and said, you know what? You gotta do that routine, but you gotta sing, one for my baby and another one for the road before it, and you gotta be drinking during it so that they know you're drunk when you come out and do the routine. And you gotta do it with a band. And I was like, this is a brilliant idea. I don't think I can ever pull this off. And I kind of put it in the back of my head as, that's a great idea for some time way in the future. And a couple years later, I ran into Norma again at Harangue. She happened to call me out in front of the entire camp and say, hey John, are you gonna do that performance we talked about this week? And while I stood still, everyone else at Harangue who's in charge of things said yes. Yes, that's gonna happen. And so I panicked for about 24 hours. And then wandering around the camp, I actually heard someone playing the song that the dance routine was to on the piano. And we managed to, in 24 hours, put together the song and the dance number with live music on stage for Norma in 48 hours. And it was the most terrifying 10 minutes of me and one piano player on stage, trying to not die and disappoint Norma. And I found her after, and she said, just held my hand and said, that was great. And that was all Norma ever did. Is you would do something for Norma, and she would say, great job, you're on the right track, you're going the right way. And to Bobby's point, Norma cared about all of us just as much as Frankie did. Yes. She cared about us by being honest. Yeah. Yeah. That is how she shared her passion with us. And my main memories of Norma are as a coach and a director. And I saw it happen with dozens of people where she'd pull people aside and say, you need to do this, and you need to do that. And it was never for Norma. It was always because she wanted us to be better. And so that's my goal from Norma, is always to try and make everyone else better. Because that's what's going to keep this alive. It's not about us, it's about giving it back. And that's what Norma did better than anyone.
I want to say at LHC, and like I was so nervous to like meet her because like she's this little fragile old woman, and you think that she's fragile, but she. And I remember like our dance teacher Valerie Salstrom, she told her what our name is back home, and she was like, oh yeah, these are the Cleveland Junior Jitterbugs, and she said Jitterbug. And she was like, Jitterbug? We don't say Jitterbug. I don't like the word Jitterbug. And she was just so straight, like she did not like that word. And then like fast forwarding to come in here, and like I just felt like I was like her little server. Like I'd walk past her, and she's just, young blood. And she would go, why don't you give me a couple scoops of ice cream? And I'm like, yes ma'am. And then you go get her some ice cream, and then next thing you know, hey, young blood, go and give me a cup of coffee. And then you ask her how many sugar. And then, don't ask her about the cream, because she got a whole other thing to go with that. But like some things that I really liked about like knowing Norma is like, I really didn't think she knew my name, because she always called me Youngblood. One year, we were at Uptown, and Peter's event, Uptown Swing Out, and we were in the class, and I think it was her like solo jazz class, and I knew I wasn't doing well in the class, like I knew that. But she go, Kyle, you gotta dance the moves. I was like, I am dancing the moves. But I knew like exactly what she meant. Like after I thought about it, I knew she meant that like instead of thinking about it and sitting there and going through my head, just do it. And so I took that and I put that in my dancing. And one time, like I always made it my job to dance in front of Norma, because like, I mean, I think everybody did that. But I remember like I walked away and I thought I did terrible in front of her, and she sent somebody to come grab me. I was so scared because I just knew she was gonna say I was not doing anything justice with Lily Hop. And I get over there and she said, wow, you was really swinging out. I walked away and I ran to Peter. I was like, oh my God, Norma just told me I was doing good. Like I've never heard her ever tell me like that I did anything good. Because she always had some words of advice or something that she had to say to tell me, like, well, you gotta move your feet like this. And I understand you wanna be smooth, but you gotta do the swing all right. And I was like, yes ma'am. But try not to get emotional, like just talking to Norma and like understanding like her life, and like I remember like putting her name in on iTunes, and I found this like comedy, her like whole comedy sketch. Okay. And when I say it was the dirtiest thing I ever. If you're gonna listen to this, you might want to put headphones on. If the wrong person walked past on the wrong part of these jokes, it's gonna get a little hectic. But I just wanted to share those couple stories. I'm terrible with public speaking, but.
Hey, I'm Peter Strom. Hello. I'm at a meeting here. Okay. It's hard to say enough about Norma. Luckily, we have a lot of people, so what people said is really great. I think I agree with what everyone's saying. Some nice things have been pointed out. Something I think is really important to point out. Norma appeared scary to people, but she was just herself, and you could be scared by her, but she wasn't scared. She was her, and you were scared or not scared. And I think, for me, been around a little while in the scene, and before Frankie passed away, I do feel like Norma had a different presence in the scene a little before Frankie passed away, because Frankie held that place of like, hey, I'm welcoming you all, I'm bringing you all in. He made it very easy socially for people, made people feel very welcome and warm, and he was really, I think he was always had on his mind to make this generation of dancers, this demographic of dancers, comfortable. And Norma was like, well, I want you to do it good. And comfort wasn't her main focus. So I do think people had a different relationship with her, and I was really, really impressed at Frankie's funeral, the big funeral, when he did pass away and everyone went to New York and stuff. I saw a real change in her because I think she decided that she wanted to make sure that this scene understood what she was trying to give them. And I think she really went out of her way to just be a little, like a kinder, gentler Norma or something. She was never mean, actually. It was just cultural misunderstandings. She talked a certain way and people weren't used to it. But I think she really made an effort in some ways to just speak a little differently and just to let people know. Because she was always giving advice, always offering up solicited or unsolicited advice, critiques, but she was like, I'm telling you how to do this dance. You're doing it terribly, but I'm telling you how to do it. She was always helping in that way. She really was. She wanted the thing to be good. And I think she really made this shift to kind of like try and bring people in a little bit more. And it was really interesting to see that change happen. I thought that was very, very generous of her because she didn't need to at all. You know, she didn't need to, but she really decided to do that. I'm trying to think of a couple experiences I had with Norma that I could share. One of the great ones, I have a couple from Beantown, so that's good for you guys. Beantown was such a great place to interact with Norma. My old partner, Caitlin, who I used to teach with, we sort of found out, like, this is before, I feel like we knew Norma more as a dancer. I didn't know, back in the day, we didn't know as much about her comedy career. Maybe I just wasn't paying good attention, I don't know, but we sort of found like, hey, she used to hang with Red Fox. So we kind of had this undercover thing. And Caitlin was like, I'm gonna look and see if I can find an album of hers. And so she went like to a vintage record shop and she found this record, like an old record, you can Google it, it's a big record. And she found this record and on the album cover is her and Red Fox doing like a John and Yoko thing, buck naked, holding hands like this. The whole lot, yes. Oh yes, it exists. Google it. She bought it. She brought it.
Naked.
It's called Buck Naked, thank you. She brought it to Beantown. Yes, she brought it to Beantown, and at the dance, she brought it over to Norma, and I was like, oh my God, what's she gonna do? Because this was before Frankie passed away. Norma was still pretty intense the way she talked to him out, but you know, she was like, hey Norma, I have this thing I really love for you to sign. And I was like, Caitlin's here, Norma's here, and I'm like, right over here, like, checking to see how it's gonna go. And she showed Norma, and Norma did the loudest, biggest laugh I have ever heard. She just screamed. She screamed for like 5 minutes laughing. She loved it so much. She signed it. She was like, I look good. That was It was awesome. It was amazing. She wasn't ashamed at all. If you've heard the comedy album, you know she's not ashamed. No, you guys really like, some of you shouldn't listen to the album. Everyone thinks like, oh, I'm sure it's ugly. It's real. It's real. But that was a really beautiful, beautiful memory. And just, again, I was like, people were so intimidated by her, and she was so cool. She was so cool. She could always take a joke on herself. She was very okay with that, really okay with that. Another great thing I had the opportunity to do at Beantown is just like, I think Beantown is actually where I got to talk to not on stage Norma. And you know, like, I think many of the elders in the scene, you know, coming into the scene, they really did have to be performing on some level, you know, like people came to them with all this weird energy, all freaked out, understanding the dance in a very small way, and these people were like, had lived so much life, had such a deep understanding of their life, the dance, the culture that it comes from, and they're talking to somebody who's very often totally clueless. So they had to be really sort of, have a presentation, you know, and so I think Norma had so much of that presentation of herself a lot of times, and she was such a great performer. She was always sort of performing. So it was kind of rare where you could get a chance to just talk with Norma the person. And it was like after, I think it was after Beantown Bounce or something, like she was just walking by, going back to the same dorm, and we just chatted for a second. I just asked her for a second about her comedy career, not dancing, just asked her about comedy stuff. And I told her, I really love Richard Pryor, it's my favorite comedian. She was like, you love Richard Pryor? And of course, if you say somebody famous, Norma's like, but that's my best friend, I know him. Like, she'll tell you all sorts of stories about hanging out with him. I learned that from interviewing, you interview Norma and you're like, did you know Duke Ellington? And she gets angry, like, what Duke Ellington? Oh, I knew it, I hung out with him all the time, every day. Like every single person she get angry at you because of course she knew him. And so she did that with Richard, and we talked about it a bunch, and it was really cool because she talked to me like we were peers, and we were not peers, not close to peers on any level. But she was so generous in the way she talked, and we just had a chat, and I felt like, wow, we kind of had this little like friendship, which is preposterous. Kyle and I were just chatting before this started. Like, one of the crazy things in this scene is that if you were around early enough, you got to meet the giants of this art form that we do. So like people don't generally get to meet and hang out with like Michael Jordan, or you don't really get to hang out with Pavarotti or something, you know, or like Baryshnikov, Fred Astaire. You don't know them, but we got to hang. I got to say, like, Frankie knew my name actually eventually, not like bragging, just like he was around. And like Norma, you could talk to her, and just getting this access with someone like Norma was such a special treat. I was able to bring her out to my event in Minneapolis that Kyle was talking about, and I was actually able to like assist for that class where she yelled at Kyle. The thing is, I'll just say, like, that was when you were doing it right, and she was like, you gotta dance, and you're like, I'm doing it right for once. I actually got it. She definitely in that class was kind of, she was like, you're the worst one in class. Somebody, I was like, they know. They know. Let's rotate those lines, okay? She'll get that heat lamp off of you. But you know, one of the beautiful things, it was such a special thing. I've never gotten through so much material in 1 hour with the class. No joke. I'm not just saying that because she was an old timer and I'm trying to hyperbole here. Like, we got through 3 choruses and a half of solo jazz in 1 hour because she was like, go. She had me demonstrate the step, and then she said to the class, stand up. And they were like, what? And she was like 5, 6, 7, 8. We didn't teach it. I demonstrated it, and then she was like, stand up, go. It was really just an education on how much you could get out of yourself. She really pulled stuff out of people. I mean, all you guys are talking, like, she pulled stuff out of you because of the force of her will and her sort of wisdom on like how this dance actually is supposed to work. And one of the really special things for me was, you know, because I was hosting, she got to come over for dinner, we hung out and stuff, and once again, like, I got to have this moment where, like, in my little record room where I have 2 chairs, and I played like a little jazz record. Everyone else is kind of hanging out, finishing up dinner. Norma's sitting in one chair, I'm sitting in one chair, like 2 people. And then we just talked about Count Basie. She was like, hey, yes, I like this about Count Basie. And she was like, talking about how great Joe Williams was. And I was like, oh, I kind of like Jimmy Rushing. She was like, you like Jimmy Rushing more than Joe Williams? Huh. She like couldn't get it, but it was, and I was like, I don't know, and she was like, nah, Joe Williams. So we just had this talk, but it was like, but she wasn't like saying I sucked. We just talked, like, you know, you talk to your friends. I got to talk to Norma like that, and I think it's really, that's what I really want to get across. I feel like a lot of us are trying to get at that like, what you see of Norma publicly is kind of far away, and it's often a presentation, and she was a really deep person. She was a really kind person. And I just feel like she really gave the scene so much. She had a life well lived. She had 10 lives in one life. I mean, it was insane how much she did. And if you could kind of hear any part of it, there was just so much wisdom to glean from that. And she was such a special person to be around. I'm just really, really thankful for the time that we had with her. You know, of course, we always want more. But, you know, as she said, it was a very good run. And, you know, She said at her, there was a showing of her documentary at the Smithsonian in DC, and you know, they get her up there and we're honoring her. We're like, you're like a hero, you're the greatest thing that's ever happened, you got this documentary. And she's so self-deprecating and cool. What she said, if I can remember specifically, she said, you know, it's real great to be in the last half of the 9th and have nobody call you the B word, you know? Pretty good, you know, like that was how she was actually so humble and so down to earth, you know, just because she would tell you the truth all the time, I think people could take her wrong, but she was so down to earth, so humble. And I think, you know, with Norma having passed, with Frankie having passed, I think it's just super important, like, I would encourage us to sort of like, remember that we're learning a dance, but we're trying to like actually have some sense of the culture that the dance comes from. You know, you can't get every part of it. You have to bring yourself to it, of course. But it is so obvious when Norma's in the room, just watching you dance, or when she's talking, it's so obvious that, oh, there's more than just a step to this dance. It's so obvious. And when she's not around, it may be less obvious. And I think it's just like up to us, the people doing this dance, to remember that. It's a little bit more than a dance, and if we can remember that, I think that'd be awesome. But that's all I'll say for Norma right now. I'll pass it over to Julia real quick. I think Julia's got a couple words, yeah?
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, Norma would probably would say right now, didn't I give you a headpiece instead of this scarf you got on? And then I would tell her, you know, I had things to do. And she would say, I know you're full of a lot of stuff God got going on. Like last summer, she said to me, what else are you gonna do? First, you got to create these short ass drawers for people to and then you have a panel on inclusivity. What is inclusivity? Right? I remember we took that picture in the cafeteria upstairs. So she turns to me and she says, Julia, inclusivity? I said, damn right. So what we did share was cuss words. And the fact that we both were New York City girls. And then another thing, you know, she knew that I had a blog called Big Girls Lindy Hop too. Something that she inspired back in 2014 when I first met her. And I said, you know, there's nobody here that looks like me. I said, I'm a big girl that Lindy Hops too. She goes, yeah. Right? So I said, you know what, so I guess a couple of years later, I just created this blog about it. And I still write on it. And you're welcome to see it, Big Girls Lindy Hop 2 at blogspot.com. So, what can I say about my aunt? Then I did the panel here. And then somebody like Samuel Coleman set me up, had her sit next to me at the panel so she could interrupt my panelists, interrupt me, right? And then I had to say, wait, this is not your panel, and you will not bother my panelists. And she kept doing it. And then she goes, okay. And she threw her head down. I said, and then she would, I remember she said to Shelby, you knew Frankie? To Shelby, right? And I said, how could he have known Shelby? I mean, how could he have known Frankie? Frankie probably, I mean, Shelby's much younger and he may not have been on the scene at the time. Stop interrupting. And so she was cool like that. And I felt welcome to talk to her like that because, like I said, I felt like she was an aunt to me. She felt like a relative to me. And we would sit and we would have these conversations. What she loved about me most was the fact that I was a teacher. And she said, I really, really want you to continue teaching Black history and sharing your knowledge with others, sharing your knowledge with this community. So, you know, that's what I do. I wrote this poem. It's called Visions of, first I called it Norma, Dancing in My Head, but I changed the Visions of Lindy Hoppers, Dancing in My Head. But it's dedicated to Norma. 3 a.m. thoughts begin to lull me to sleep, to dreams in a time of hair flowers, hair conchs, and cars with running boards. When Chick Webb's drum beats welcome working women into the Savoy for Saturday nights away from maid duty in the Great Gatsby-like kitchens. These women Lindy hop their blues away while inhabiting tribal movements like the Tranky Doo, the Shim Sham, Big Apple, and Black Bottom. But aerials would mesmerize any ballroom goer. Moving in sync, their bodies cried, Africa, Africa, Africa. Descendants of the Igbo, the Ewe, Mandingo, and Ashanti now dancing those Savoy cat corners jams. Winning Harvest Moon balls, dressed in the 1930s couture party adornments, so many well-dressed, proud, smiling Black men and women dancing like that happy dance. You know the one, the Lindy. They were in Dancer Delight on Lenox Avenue. They strutted their stuff. At the picture show, the world saw their craft. On the dance floor, none ever quite like them. Harlem was in vogue, and so were they. Wishing I could be born again as dancers like them on airstep Saturday nights, bringing back Calloway, Ellington, Ella, and Basie. Yes, in my dream, I could see them too. I could see Norma, I could see Frankie, I could see Al, I could see Leon, I could see Billy. And they were smiling at me. There was a joy, something of an internal happiness in them drawing me to write this poem today. So Langston Hughes said it simply, to fling my arms wide in the face of the sun, dancing and whirling till the quick day is done. Rest at pale evening near a tall, slim tree, night coming wonderfully, tenderly, black like me. And I add dancing like me for Norma. So as Norma would say to you all, to me, keep swinging, y'all. Keep swinging. And that's visions of Norma dancing in my head. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know we're out of time, but Josh wanted to say something, so I'm just going to quickly hand the mic over to him.
Okay. I met Norma for the first time 7 years ago. I was 6 months into my dancing, and I was at Camp Jitterbug over in Seattle at the Jump Session show. I had rocked to some random person. I had no idea who they were, across the street from where I live, and I saw that they were remodeling their home, and I said, "Hey, sir, I really want to go to this swing dance event, and I don't really have a lot of money, so can I work for you for $10 an hour so I can go to this event?" And he said, "Sure, kid." And while I was at that event, at the Jump Session show, I saw a reenactment of Hell's A-Poppin'. And then this older woman walks on the stage, and everyone just goes nuts, and I'm completely clueless. Because I hadn't seen, at this point, 6 months into my dancing, the original Hell's A-Poppin'. At which point, someone leaned over to me and said, "That's Norma Miller. You know, she's one of the original Whitey's Lindy Hoppers. These people just did her routine." And it became obvious that no one knew that she was going to be there. And I was floored, and the first thing I did is I went home and I watched it. Because in that moment, I had seen that routine, and I had already told myself, I want to do that in 5 years. Not necessarily Hell's A-Poppin', but I want to be on that stage in 5 years. And I'm going to pause there, because now I'm going to pick up again with the first time I came to Beantown. And my first Beantown, Robert White was giving a talk. And the title of this talk was called The Dark Ages. And, yeah, The Dark Ages. And the premise that you gave for this is that we're walking into a time where we don't have as many as our connections to our elders. And all I could think of after she passed was that talk and that title. And, you know, and I'm sure a lot of people are feeling this. It's like, how do we move on? You know? Like, how do we keep going? And for me, as a newer person coming to this dance, for me, like Norma, you know, I've been learning about what it means to be a servant leader, and for me, she was a servant leader, and I think she was that for a lot of people. You know, I was intimidated by Norma, but I felt blessed to be able to come here to Beantown to sit at the same table with her. And you know, I would, for the longest time, I would be like, I was a server, and I would, and after that, I tried not to talk with her, but I would listen. And then one day, this is my first special memory with her. She asked me to come over, and this kind of started me having a little bit of a closer relationship with her. She asked me to come over, and she started asking me about my life. And some people know this, but not everyone. Like, my life's a complicated one. And she started asking me about my mom. My relationship with my mother is a complicated one. And she asked me to call my mother right then and there. And I did. And she took the phone from me, and she said, "Hi, is this Jennifer?" And I said, and I guess my mom said yes, and she's like, "Well, I'm Norma Miller." My mom doesn't know who that is. And she's like, "I'm here to tell you that you should be very proud of your son." And that was the nicest thing that anyone has ever done for me. And my second special memory, because I know we gotta go. My second special memory was after talking with her, and I had questions for her. Norma, what is swing? She told me total body coordination on the beat with or without a partner. She did not tell me what that meant. She did not allow me to ask any questions. I had to go out and figure out my answer, you know. And unfortunately, I never had an opportunity to tell her what the answer was and figure it out. But she gave me little pieces of advice, little moments of, y'all were good. Little things that she would say. Oftentimes she would say, dancing, your dancing's gotta look sexy. You know? She didn't mean sex, she meant appealing. Because, you know, for a dance that was done by people who were denied so many liberties, including the liberties of being with each other, was important. And if you were younger, you liked things that were appealing to the eye, right? So that's what she meant to me. And my ending point here is when I started doing the ambassador routines one year, it's like we had wrapped it up and everything's done. So I'm like, all right, everyone, you know, between now and then you got to go and figure out your outfit, and then tech rehearsal is there. And I turn around and Norma's standing right there, and she's like, you're finished? I just walked in, can I see it? And I'm like, okay, I just told everyone they're done, but Norma's here. I'm like, okay, hey everyone, Norma's here. So we got to do it again. Even though you're really tired, I just made you do it like 10 times. And so we did it, and afterwards she sat there and she said, I can die happy now, because it is the youth that will carry this dance forward. And of course that means there's youth, you know, as Frankie said, is anyone younger than him. So I imagine that Norma means something similar to that. But it's those of us that exist now in this community, and those little moments where we can reach out and touch a person's life are just so important. And Norma touched my life, and she touched the life of so many people in this room. And remembering Norma is also like remembering what I want to carry forward into the community. Yep. That's all I have to say.
Very good at
fibrosis. Take
I just want to
the microphone.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you all so much for sharing. We're going to miss Norma so much, but we have our memories, and we need to pass that on. And so that's what we're going to do. Frankie, Norma, you're in our hearts. Thank you so much.